Vi går videre i programmet nå, og det neste innslaget, det er faktisk et innslag. Det er et opptak vi har gjort med en dame fra, vi kan vel si, fra andre siden av kloden. Hun heter Amy Foote. Hun er kokk, sjefskokk i Alaska Native Medical Center, som er en urfolksinstitusjon i Anchorage, Alaska. Det spesielle med denne institusjonen, det er det at de lager mat av tradisjonelle naturprodukter. De får inn elgkjøtt, caribou-kjøtt, fugler, fisk, planter, bær, fra rundt omkring i Alaska, og så lykkes de da med å opprettholde en tradisjonell form for meny til syke. Og det andre som er spesielt er at de også ser på det her som en slags viktig rolle de har som en stor helseinstitusjon, nemlig å bygge opp om lokalsamfunn rundt omkring, og viktigheten av mat som helse, som healing, altså helbredende, en helbredende faktor i helsetjenesten. Så nå skal vi se på det opptaket, og dette opptaket er gjort klokka 6 på morgenen i Alaska, så Amy har vært skikkelig fleksibel for å hjelpe oss med dette innlegget. Yeah, good morning, Alaska. Hello, Amy.
Good morning.
Nice to have you here with us today. And despite the time differences, 10 hours between Norway and Alaska, this is kind of impressive that we managed to find a way to still be able to have this conversation. I understood it's early morning in Alaska where you are. Is that right?
It is 6 a.m.
Yeah, so good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, so we're going to have a PowerPoint presentation from you, from your work, from your ideas, how you are solving or using traditional food products from the nature as a part of both healing and also creating better lives for people who struggle with their health. And you talked a lot about food as also an aspect of healing yesterday, and we're really looking forward to hear more about that during your presentation. So please start off by telling a bit about yourself and just go on with your presentation. We're very eager to hear more.
All right. Thank you. So I'm the executive chef at the Alaska Native Medical Center here in Anchorage, Alaska, and I've been here for about 6 or 7 years. Prior to that, I've been a chef in different hotels and hunting and fishing lodges and restaurants kind of along the way, and ended up here in Alaska and absolutely love what I do. So I manage the food services for our patients in our retail setting here. But what I want to talk to you today about is our traditional foods program, and kind of the journey to get to where we are so that we can serve seal soup to our patients.
Yeah, sounds really interesting. And we have just spent the last day on discussing about many things, but among those things also this, on how we could create more jobs out of the wealth we have in our close nature. And Alaska and Finnmark, which is the region we live, are climately really similar to each other. We have the same kind of temperatures, the same kind of wildlife, the berries and many of the things are similar to each other. But the big difference, of course, is the size. Alaska is the size of approximately 5 Norways, all of our countries. So it's obviously a huge land area, but maybe you could tell something about the importance about the quantums, and is it you have like I'm looking for the words now. How important is it to have a kind of a safe source of resources when you're as a chef dependent on the products coming in? Are you ever experiencing a lack of? Yeah.
Yeah, so food security is a huge concern, I think, all the way around for Alaskans. And, you know, if we are not producing it or growing it here, then we are absolutely dependent on it coming from a barge. And so, you know, as we faced, you know, a large earthquake in Alaska a couple of years ago, we saw some disruption in supply chains, and it became even more aware of our remoteness and our dependency on those outside sources. So there is a really, there is a movement in Alaska, absolutely, and a focus on making sure that we're self-sufficient and that, you know, we can sustain ourselves. A lot of Alaskans, including Alaska natives, live very much off of what we can harvest and what we can grow here. So fishing and hunting and harvesting wild berries and plants are, and not just for our foods, but for our medicines. We see that is a huge part of what we do.
Interesting. Yeah, just please go on with some of the pictures you mentioned, and also it was interesting to hear yesterday about this trading culture, because you solved some of the problem by trading with each other. You know, receiving the products from the nature and you giving back something in return, which is not necessarily money, and that perspective was interesting to hear about. So. Yeah.
All right, let's see if I can get my presentation up here. Can you guys see that?
Not yet.
Okay.
Is there a share button?
I thought that's what I did, but let's try again. It says I'm sharing the screen. Can you see it now?
Yeah, now we see the whole screen, so.
Okay.
If you put that, yeah, if you put that into a full screen mode, so.
There you go.
Yeah, like that. Yeah,
Can
perfect. Yeah,
okay.
Perfect.
So I was going to talk about serving our menu of tradition. Again, I'm the chef at the Alaska Native Medical Center. I want to talk a little bit about the regulatory. This is really where things started when Alaska started needing to have medical facilities and long-term care and schools and kind of going into that institution. Then a lot of regulatory took over, and so traditional foods became highly regulated, and they weren't coming from licensed facilities, and so it all got shut down. And so there was this need for years of these comfort foods, these healing foods, these traditional methods to come back to healthcare, obviously, and for school programs and long-term care. So it was a long kind of uphill battle for that to get. But in 2014, the Farm Bill did address, and they actually adopted verbiage that had already been in the Alaska State Food Code for a number of years. But we had a senator and then Dr. Ted Mala, who is Alaska Native as well, really push and support getting this through. So it says that we are allowed for child nutrition, food services at hospitals, long-term care, that we're allowed to serve traditional foods in public. And what that meant is it didn't just go to a potluck, it went to us being able to serve them. So we weren't allowed to sell. We still aren't allowed to sell any of the traditional foods on that end of things. But we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Then we saw the Alaska State Food Code really be, I would say, kind of a template for other programs. In 2018, the 2018 Farm Bill, it was not included in. So now it's actually become in the U.S. title, U.S. Code Title 25. So now it literally will take an act of Congress for us to not be able to serve traditional foods, which is amazing, exciting. Took a really long time to get there, but it really strengthens our ability to continue doing our program. So traditional wild game, seafood, the Department of Health and Human Services has a, senior lunch programs. There are some stipulations on this, and as on any type of protein that you would get, you need to be making sure that your animal is not diseased. And a lot of times, you know, you'll see places rely on that for the grocery store or for the butcher. Well, in this scenario, we kind of are the butcher. So you need to, the requirements require that items are whole, gutted, or gilled, or in roasts or quarters without further processing. And so we can't take any ground meats. You have to have the knowledge to know when you could see a diseased animal, that the food is butchered and it's dressed properly, and then that it's stored properly. Fortunately, we're in both in colder or cooler climates, but there is a lot of opportunity for, you know, microbial growth and deterioration along the way. So the safety is the most important thing, as always, in food. So especially when you're serving an immune compromised group of people like we are. There are some items that are not allowable. So shellfish, fox, polar bear, any bear meat, actually, and walrus meat. There's a concern for trichinosis in those species. Seal or whale oil with or without meat. So nothing kind of fermented, which are traditional recipes that we see frequently. There is a manilic in Kotzebue, just got a variance from the state of Alaska just within the last month, and it's really exciting. They have got a variance to actually make and serve their own seal oil. And seal oil is Alaska's condiment. That's probably one of our most highly requested items that we have. So pretty exciting stuff there. So as you mentioned, Alaska is vast. We are huge. And what this map sort of represents is Anchorage. And then these communities that you see are the communities that actually have helped support our traditional foods program at the hospital. And so you see we're supporting up to 200, well, there's 229 federally recognized tribes in Alaska. And so everyone's foods are a little different, and that's based on just the vastness of the region. And so we have things from seal to herring eggs to moose to caribou, and everybody eats it kind of a little bit different. So I like to show this because, as you mentioned, we're huge. We're a big area and lots of different geography and animals and plant life. So we came up with some ways to address this. What can we purchase? What can we grow? What can we harvest? And this is where we got a little bit creative on things because we had to. So Alaskan, the grown items, we have actually a healing guardian here on campus that we have some traditional foods and plants that we sell. The Tyonek garden is a native-owned garden, and we bought items like carrots and onions, and that helps support their initiatives in their village. Seeds of Change in Alaska is actually a behavioral health project that focuses on keeping people healthy and in a behavioral sense. And so they have a hydroponic garden here locally, and we buy all of our fresh herbs from them, they're just wonderful to have. I'm sure in the middle of winter you can understand that having fresh herbs in Alaska is pretty exciting. We buy Alaskan grown whenever possible. And then Alaska Pacific University has a farm called Spring Creek Farm. And we have worked with them for the last couple of years. We really got our first fruits of our labor, I guess, with them. So we did dandelion roots and greens and buds from them. We did sorrel and lovage. Of course, kale and onions and cabbage and carrots all grow really great in Alaska. This year was the first year that they tapped some birch trees for us. So here's some pictures of the things that we did. Spruce tips. You can see the garden here, fiddlehead ferns, and fireweed there. You know, these are all probably familiar items. I imagine that a lot of these are familiar to you. So these are the items that we were able to either harvest ourselves, go and gather. These are all gathered items, actually, but we can buy the fiddlehead ferns, the spruce tips, and the beach asparagus. Another item that is really coveted that we use is bull kelp, seaweed, different types of seaweed. So fishing, we have had a couple of really great stories. We worked with commercial fishermen that were harvesting king salmon, and they were just throwing the heads over or grinding them up and putting them back in the ocean. And so we asked them to reserve those, and we would purchase them because fish head soup is a really healing broth. We just cook it until, you know, everything kind of breaks down into this rich, delicious broth, and it's very, very healing as well. Hooligan, we get a couple of pounds, I don't know if you're a couple 1,000 pounds of hooligan in the last few years. They're a small, sometimes kind of like a smelt, I guess, an oilier fish. Here's some photos of the different foods that we've served with dry fish. Here's the fish heads down here. Herring eggs. We haven't had a herring egg donation or able to serve those for a couple years, but that goes back to, I believe, just traditional living and life cycles, and probably climate has affected that as well, climate change. But you know, we don't always have a great berry year, and we don't always have a great year to be able to harvest everything. You know, the salmon don't always run as strong. And so we've had a couple of less strong years for the herring eggs. So that's changed that a little bit. This is the company I work for. We got to go to Kotzebue and harvest sheefish. This is Cyrus Harris here. He is the hunter for the Manilic Association. He's also been the champion for that seal oil project that I mentioned earlier, but we got to go up and he provided us with his family's traditional ice fishing poles and taught us how to fish sheefish, which was amazing. So here's some more pictures of, this is the hooligan down here at the bottom, some fish head soup. Here's a large donation of hooligan. We only serve supporting, obviously, our local fisheries, our economy in that way. And we try to work with native fishermen, Alaska native fishermen, as much as possible. So we only serve wild Alaskan salmon. You won't find farmed fish on my menu. So hunting is where we've even gotten more creative. Reindeer moose, black-tailed deer, and harbor seal. So here's some photos of the things that we've done there. We've developed a really strong relationship with our Professional Hunters Association here in Alaska. And in doing so, when we have people come in and for tourism that want to hunt, a lot of times they don't want to take their products with them, or they can't afford to take their meats with them. And so we've worked with them. This is a moose leg. These are caribou bones. This is moose head soup. When you boil down the whole moose, when we get it in this big pot, we singe the hair and then we boil that all down. And you can see we ate the tongue and everything when we made that. These are some of the fishing and hunting lodges that have helped support our program on that end of things. We have a really big focus on the education and a teaching kitchen. And so you can see the smile on this guy's face. He is the first time he's ever butchered anything. So I was teaching him how to break down a moose leg. in our kitchen. Seal. So our seal comes from, right now it's coming from a Alaska Native hunter out of Ketchikan. He uses that opportunity to teach kids and other kind of more traditional methods. They use the fur in Alaska Native crafts, and then the most coveted items stay obviously for the elders within the village, and then the rest of it comes up to us. And so we make a soup usually out of that. Most of the time, I'm trying to stretch these donations as far as possible so that we can provide healing to as many people as possible. Our grand total since 2014 is almost 10 tons, well, it's over 10 tons of traditional foods that we've been able to either harvest, hunt, gather, and serve to our patients. So when I totaled that up, that's a pretty amazing number. And the impact of that, since January of 2015, we've served over 1 million patient meals in that 6-year period, well, 5-year period of time. And over 73% of our patient menu has traditional or local ingredients on it, which really impacts our health. It impacts the health of our community, economically as well, because we're keeping the money in Alaska and we're keeping people working. This is how you can get a hold of our program, and those are some berries that we had harvested. This is our patient menu. Let's see. COVID has become the talk of many, right, these days. But caring during COVID really became more apparently and kind of acutely aware of how important our traditional foods program was. People are stuck here in the hospital and their families can't visit them. They can't necessarily bring them the things they like to eat or their healing foods. And so we started really ramping up the offerings. So you can see on here all the different offerings that we've been doing to try to keep patients, emotionally well, physically well, and on the path to healing, get them out of the hospital and back to their families. So I just have a few pictures of some of this. Is some bone marrow. That's a dried hooligan there. Just some kind of traditional ingredients. Some of these probably look really familiar. This is fried salmon skin that we serve. This is one of my favorite sets. This is one of our patients where you can see we had brought some herring eggs into her room. And if this isn't healing as you watch it, then I don't know what is. So let food be thy medicine and let medicine be thy food. Anyway, I'm excited to have some more conversation with you. Do you have any questions about what we do? And
yeah, thank you so much for inspiring lecture. Now I hear myself a bit. Now it disappeared. Okay, good. Yeah, thank you so much for an inspiring lecture. And I see, as you mentioned, a lot of familiar products that I myself have grown up with, and I'm sure many of our viewers have recognized as their local foods. The interesting part is here how you are empowering local communities, empowering indigenous communities, and also kind of acknowledging the traditional knowledge, the way of hunting. How important would you say that the institutional part plays here? You're obviously a big institution, medical center, and you're using your role, as I see it, as a buyer, using your power of buying or trading or being a kind of a post box for all these hunters out there. How important is it to have this kind of institutions taking this role as acknowledging and empowering the local communities through food?
Yeah. So I think the most important piece of doing this is having the legislative piece, having the ability to do it, and that was the key missing piece once it was kind of all taken away from with guidelines and so many new rules, the big piece was having the ability to do it. And so once, we had that governmental sort of support in the Farm Bill, the next biggest hurdle was having, and it wasn't a hurdle for us because the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium wholeheartedly believes in traditional methods, traditional healing, traditional foods. And so they have been an amazing support with our program and allowing us to continue. So having that support of kind of your community as well is really important. Supporting your local community, like I said, with whether it's with a community garden, or if it's with a behavioral health program, or if it's just buying Alaskan grown items, it's all supporting what we have to growing and continuing all of our community as a state of Alaska into a better place, a safer, more secure place.
Yeah. Could you tell a bit how the map looks like in Alaska, in those areas where the hunters are hunting and the gatherers are gathering? Is it a lot of private land ownership, or is it federal government, state-owned land? How are you organized?
Really just depends. It really depends on where you're at. And again, it's so vast. A lot of it can be federally managed land, which is why I feel like it's so amazing we've been able to get this program to the point that it is, because we're in a city. We're in Anchorage, Alaska, and there's a lot of what we need comes from these other areas and in the villages. So some of it is Native owned, some of it is federal government owned. There is private as well. The hunting, if it's in those areas, most of them have either a lease or they have their own private land.
Okay. Obviously, when you talk about local foods in Alaska, we have to kind of translate the word local into some other levels, because Alaska is so big. It's like if we would get our local food from Italy, which is really, really far away, but it kind of shows the differences between most European countries and certainly our region and American states and Alaska. How is the economy in this for the hunters and the gatherers and so on? It must be kind of expensive to transport the food and to all the equipment you need to actually hunt the moose and transport it for miles and miles to you guys. How does that system work?
So we have a couple of different things there. So we aren't, again, allowed to purchase, and they're not allowed to sell any of the game meat. So if you're looking specifically with hunted items, we can barter. So we can buy your ammunition, we can help pay the shipping, we can buy gasoline for your ATV or for your snow machine or your boat. So that's legal, and that is part of what we're allowable to do. We do have a donor here with our program that has been just amazing in supporting our shipping. So back in December, when we got 1,000 pounds of Sitka black-tailed deer donated, actually it was Kodiak, it came from Kodiak Island, we were able to have that shipped in, and our donor paid for it. But there is the ability to kind of barter and go back to what was, I think you used the word pre or decolonization. It is a focus on decolonizing by getting out of the monetary system and going back to bartering and trading. So we are able to use those traditional methods of trade as well.
Interesting. It sounds like a kind of a decolonization aspect also in this, when you're taking a step away from the, the monetary system and actually doing the trading the old-fashioned way. So I know from our local municipalities we have some of the same sort of activities where people donate some of the moose they have hunted, the berries they have picked to the local elder centers and so on. But there's not really a big economics in it, and it's not kind of a livelihood for people. So what we are looking for in our conversations here today is how can we like create some income for people, a job, a reason to stay in these vast remote areas far away from cities. And of course, the regulations are really different between our countries. How could you see your own institution playing a bigger role as a purchaser if the law was different, and through that supporting and empowering the different kind of communities who deliver these kind of goods for you guys?
Yeah, and I think that kind of that whole piece of going back to, caring for your whole community. And so, I imagine that there's still a need for a traditional diet, and for that same healing power and for that focus on wellness. I don't think that has necessarily to do with country boundaries, so to speak, right? So I think looking at it, it's really hard to quantify in a monetary level, but, having organizations that would have even hunters that went out, paid hunters, paid jobs to go out and hunt and to harvest, or having your own high tunnels to grow some of these items and try to cultivate some of these items. I think there's opportunity there as well. We're seeing a lot of that kind of grassroots effort in Alaska as well. And so I do think that, the need is there. I think that our bodies aren't necessarily changing for what we need for healing. I think the healing aspect of being out and hunting and fishing and gathering for communities and that connection to our land is really important. I think we protect what we love. And so if we love fishing, then we protect our waters and we protect our fishing. If we love gathering berries, then we protect our land. So I think it all goes hand in hand, right? So part of protecting is that financial piece, right? And the legislative, or looking at the governing piece of that. So, very much going back to the decolonizing of which we spoke of would help with that. We have to look at economic impact in many different ways, and sometimes it's not quantifiable.
Okay, so you actually see some sort of economy in protecting the land. So there's also a way of putting a value on land protected, as you see it.
I believe so, yes, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you so much for being with us for this conversation. And I know it's really, really early in the morning for you, so I'm letting you start off the day now. And as we are finishing our day here in Norway, again, really inspiring to hear your experience and your way of finding solutions, because that's the point with these conversations we have had today and yesterday, to see, look for solutions really to create jobs, maintain livelihoods for people in remote areas. And your healing aspect, I think, is also really important to bring with us to our national, regional hospitals and institutions who deal with people's health. So thank you so much for being with us and sharing your ideas.
Absolutely. Thanks for letting me talk about my awesome job I get to do every day.
Yeah. Okay.